Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. And today, we're once again fortunate to welcome a good friend of the Gaggle, Hans Mahncke, who's already been on the show many times. And as Gagglers may remember, when Hans was on about a month ago, we made a tentative date to reconvene as the Danchenko trial unfolded. As it seems, the Danchenko trial is very, very quick and is likely to come to a conclusion either today or tomorrow. So obviously we need an update as to what has happened. People remember Igor Danchenko was the chief source of the Steele dossier, the dossier prepared by former MI6 man Christopher Steele. And Durham indicted him for, I think, on 5 counts of lying to the FBI. And this case doesn't seem terribly conclusive, which no doubt you'll explain to us, but certain things, remarkable things have emerged. And I'll just go through a few of them. I mean, we found out just before the start of the trial that Danchenko had been a confidential human source for the FBI starting in, I think, March 2017 through to about October 2020. Then we also found out that Christopher Steele had been offered $1 million by the FBI to confirm any of his claims about Trump-Russia collusion. And then we also found out that, contrary to what Mueller had said on Capitol Hill, that the Steele dossier wasn't within his purview, sounding like W.C. Fields. It turns out that the Mueller crowd was indeed investigating the Steele dossier. But perhaps now you'll go into greater details as to why this case has unraveled and what else we found out about Danchenko and what he was up to.
And maybe, Hans, why only like Fox News is talking about it? Go ahead.
Yeah, and even though they're the only ones talking about it, they're not talking about it properly. I mean, they're sort of misdirecting either inadvertently or on purpose. I mean, I don't know. They get sort of bogged down in these details of the case. But as George said, that's not really what's coming out of this. Sure, he was charged with these 5 lies. One's already been dismissed. The judge already said, no, you didn't prove it. That was, I think we talked about this last time, but just, I mean, to briefly recap, this was this issue of the FBI had asked Danchenko, did you ever talk to Charles Dolan? Charles Dolan is this Clinton operative about the dossier. And he said no. Now, if we interpret the word talk and it's like a very narrow sense, well, Durham cannot prove what they talked about because Durham doesn't have recordings of their conversations. But these guys traveled to Moscow twice. They hung around, they went to restaurants, they did all kinds of stuff together. And there's emails of them talking about the dossier. So of course they talked on top of writing and emails. But the judge saw it in a very narrow way and said, well, there's no evidence that they talked. There's only evidence that they emailed. Hence, the judge threw it out. So that's the sort of situation we're facing. It's pretty ridiculous. So there's 4 charges left, but essentially it's just 1 charge. So we'll probably find out today or tomorrow what's going to happen with that. But that's almost a sideshow. And even though a lot of people are focused on it, and of course the media that does talk about it, they're very happy about it because it just makes Durham look bad because he's not able to prove these cases as far as these narrow charges are concerned. But what he did prove, and this is much more important, as George said, is he proved that Comey lied under oath over and over. He proved that Mueller lied under oath over and over. I mean, we can pick these things apart bit by bit. So first of all, why don't we start with Comey? So the $1 million that George mentioned. That was on October 3rd, 2016. Steele met a bunch of FBI agents in Rome. They flew out to meet him, big deal. And they asked him, who are your sources? How do you know this? And he was just totally uncooperative. And then they said, okay, and we know this because one of these agents was in court last week testifying to all this. And then they said, okay, here's $1 million. Give us anything. Any kind of evidence, documentary or whatever you have, just give us anything. And he had nothing whatsoever. And 18 days later, these same FBI people went to the FISA court and said, Carter Page is a spy for the Russian Federation, and we need to have a FISA warrant on the Trump campaign, and we need to see everything. And of course, they didn't mention that Steele wasn't able to back up anything, that he was uncooperative, that despite $1 million, which of course they didn't mention $1 million either, there was nothing. They just ignored that. They said it's been partly verified or, words to that effect.
Is that,
so
is
they
that
relied
the, sorry,
on
sorry,
that to get the warrant.
The term they used, partly confirmed? I mean, what was it that they told the FISA court, that it's been partly verified?
Well, we don't know because that portion's redacted, but a lot of the language that we find in the FISA warrant is you can also find in subsequent documents, FBI briefing documents, the ICA, which is the Intelligence Community Assessment, where they basically said, oh, Putin wanted to elect Trump. So there's a lot of copy and paste going between those things. And various of these documents use exactly that term. Yes, partly verified. Where we know it's there. With the FISA warrant, we're not, well, because it's so redacted, we don't know, but pretty sure there's something to that effect there. Or it does talk about Steele. That's not redacted, and it does say that he's trustworthy and blah blah blah. Again, not mentioning that he sat there 18 days earlier saying, no, I don't have anything. I'm not going to give you anything, or whatever the words were. But I think the $1 million is pretty important here because it goes to, giving him an incentive to cough something up. And then you go, and of course it wasn't mentioned. It was just not mentioned at all. In fact, in the subsequent documents, we don't know if it's in the FISA warrant, but in the subsequent documents, they say the only thing we ever gave Steele was money for his travel expenses. I mean, that they say that, right? That infers, oh, the man has no incentives at all. He's just a good Samaritan who came forward and gave this stuff, and and no mention, of course, of the $1 million incentive either. So this is very, very problematic on the FBI's part, on Comey's part at the time. He was in charge of that place. So 18 days between.
Sorry to interrupt. Do we know how much money was actually given to Steele? I mean, what kind of money was exchanged hands between the FBI?
Right. So there's the Inspector General has this 95,000 sort of that number has been bandied about. It's not entirely clear in what exactly that was for. Was that for some attendant work, or was it for the dossier? We don't know exactly what that was. The only thing that we know for sure is these travel expenses, because that's the only part that the FBI has admitted. So let's assume it's 95,000. Well, that's not, I mean, that's 10% of the $1 million that was put out there. The other thing, the other dog that didn't bark here, which I don't think Durham discussed in court last week. Maybe it's sort of not, maybe he didn't think it was relevant or whatever. But it's extremely relevant if you want to really get to the crux of this conspiracy to get Trump. If there was any truth to anything at all, so if it wasn't just Danchenko and Steele making up crap, if it's anything else, obviously Steele, October 3rd, 2016, is going to call his friend Danchenko and say, hey, Igor, the FBI is going to give us $1 million if you can give us something, give us some kind of info on, anything. And I bet anything that call never happened, because of course, both of them knew that it was all made up. So there's no point making that call. But I'm sure no one ever inquired into that direction, that dog that didn't bark. So that didn't happen. All right. So 18 days after Steele became uncooperative and didn't provide anything, despite the offer, they go after Carter Page. A few weeks after that, they go with this ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment, which is this ridiculous document. I'm sure you've seen it and your viewers have seen it. It's basically just a sort of a cobbled together mess of like RT ran a show in September of 2016, and the show said something bad about Hillary Clinton.
No, it's worse than that. It ran a show in 2012. It was dated 4 or 5 years.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, 4 years. Yeah, 4 years out of date. Yeah.
So, that's right. And the real purpose of that ICA was to attach the Steele dossier. That was the only real thing they wanted to do, because by attaching the Steele dossier becomes legitimized because it's part of a US intelligence community official work product there. And that's exactly how it went down, because as soon as it came out, the ICA, and we only saw this pamphlet version, which talks what Peter said about these kinds of, RT once ran a story, this ridiculous stuff.
It was 25 pages, and 7 pages of it was devoted to RT, and 4 pages were blank.
Exactly.
But Hans, just this ICA, that the fact that they relied on the Steele dossier, we didn't find out about that till 2020, right? Because we didn't know in 2017 that the Steele dossier was a part of the ICA. Am I right about that?
No, we did. No, you're right that we didn't know what they attached. We didn't see the text. We know that was only released in September of 2020. So that's right. But what they did, leak, or whatever the correct term is, there is more than a leak. It's more of a frame job. When they released this ICA pamphlet in January of 2017, before Trump even became president, someone told the media, someone told CNN, it was CNN who came out first with this, Jake Tapper, this is from famous January 10th article, where he says the Steele dossier, or a version of it, was attached to the ICA. And instead of, making it into like, afterwards, the intelligence community people who were interviewed by Horowitz or whatever, they said, we attached it because it was just so sort of peripheral. But of course, Jake Tapper turned it around. He said it was attached, but then redacted because it's so top secret and so important and so, terrible and so on. So it was the exact opposite of what we were then told it was. But the point of all that was to say, the ICA had the Steele dossier attached, therefore the Steele dossier must be credible. Otherwise, US intelligence communities would have never done that to, attach that. And that's how it all kicked off. And then so from January 10th, 2017 onwards, all you ever heard was P-tape and collusion and, all these allegations. And that's how they got that in there. And that document, as George just said, was released in 2020. And it says it was partly corroborated. Those are the words used there, blatant lie.
Right. Because sorry, go
ahead, George. Go ahead, George.
No, it's just to follow up on what I asked, because I seem to remember Clapper being asked on CNN precisely on this question about the Steele dossier. And he said, no, the Steele dossier didn't play any part in the ICA. So that's why I was thinking that we didn't know about the role of the Steele dossier.
No, you're right. But he was basically saying that those the stuff about RT and the stuff about Steele is separate. So, we didn't need Steele to back up what we knew about RT being so terrible and having, it means nothing really, but he was just kind of talking himself out of a problem. But yeah, officially, I guess they would say, no, we just attached the Steele dossier, but the Steele dossier did not, inform the pamphlet, which is true because the pamphlet doesn't say anything about the Steele dossier, but it doesn't make any sense because why would you attach it then? And again, they only attached it because they wanted to get it out in the media. Because people forget this, because it's been around so much and everyone knows everything about the Steele dossier. People forget that it was out there starting in July of 2016. Comey gave it to Steele gave it to the FBI on July 5th, 2016. So the FBI's had it since then. But Steele also shared it with the media over and over, bits and pieces, and he had interviews again and again, and he just tried to keep pushing it into the media. And of course, the Fusion GPS operatives that he was working for did that too. And the media did not bite. I think people kind of overlook that sometimes, that if you look at the entire history of media reporting in 2016, there is no Steele dossier, there's nothing. I mean, you have some people on Twitter saying, oh, there's something going on in the background about Trump and it's very bad, but no one knew what it was, because the media back then, I guess they still had some kind of standards, and were like, well, we have no idea if any of this is true, we can't publish it. But of course, as soon as the ICA attached it, oh, now we can publish it. And that was the whole point.
You know, when this trial with Danchenko, I mean, it's the way I look at it from where I live here, they finally got a Russian, okay, in Russiagate, okay. But you said, okay, so we have Danchenko, he lied. There's nothing new about that. Just about every single player involved here has lied. So what is Durham doing? I mean, is he on our side or not? Is he doing a really narrow prosecution here? Is this the bow on top of everything? Because if it's Danchenko, well, I'm really let down. Okay, everybody else gets away with it, and it's like a sense of closure artificially, because this trial only opens up so many other doors, and it shows the complicity of so many of these players conspired together. I mean, I am not only am I not satisfied, I'm even more outraged than before, because all of them get away with it.
They do. My personal view is that one of two things happened. Either Durham kind of just made some strategic blunders early on, where he just decided to focus on the wrong people. Or he thought, well, we're gonna focus on these private actors, so the Clinton lawyer and Danchenko, the sort of the Steele operative, and by focusing on them and cracking them, we can sort of peel back the onion and we can get into deeper things here. So and that just didn't work out for him, and that's kind of option one. And option two is a version of that, but that version involves Merrick Garland and the Attorney General's office and Biden DOJ, where the peeling back of the onion was basically just stopped. He was just told, you can't do that. And maybe he was told, do these cases first, and then once we're done with that, we can decide if you're allowed to continue, or something to that effect. Because this is not an independent counsel. This is not the system as it used to be back in the 90s and so on. The special counsel is basically a regulation under DOJ. That's all it is. So the guy is answerable to the Attorney General. So, we kind of attribute a lot of power and independence to this guy. That's not really true. They do have a lot of power and independence if they're Robert Mueller, and they have the entire weight of the establishment and the media and Congress and all behind him. But on his own, he's nothing, and he's completely dependent on what Garland wants. So maybe we will hear that story when he's done, where he comes out and says, I'm sorry, guys, I couldn't do what I wanted to do because of this Garland fellow. So we'll see if that happens.
But it seems to me, when at the end of the day, it's and this should be chilling for everyone. When we look at what the Durham probe and Horowitz and all of this here, at the end of the day, it's protecting the FBI and the DOJ. That's what this is all about. It's damage control to protect themselves. That's what this whole thing is about, in my mind.
No, you're absolutely right. And there's two very specific things that happened, one in the Sussman trial and one in the Danchenko trial. And if you look back at it, it's almost as if that was by design, and that was sort of an emergency break, or a sort of a get out clause, or whatever you want to call it, for the establishment, for the FBI, for all these people. If you recall, in Sussman, there was absolute 100% proof, this documentary evidence that we always seek, that Sussman lied to the FBI. And that was that he had, there was a text message that he had sent to James Baker of the FBI, saying that he was not representing the Clinton campaign. It said that in the text message. Well, guess what? Durham wasn't given the text message. So when Durham made the charge, Durham had to make the charge based on verbal commentary. And a few weeks or a week or so before the trial, when it was too late to introduce that bit of evidence, suddenly Baker goes, oh, I checked my phone. Look, I have this text message. Is that something that might be useful to you? Knowing that it's too late. So that's
why was it too late? Why couldn't it be introduced?
Well, just rules of evidence, and like just before trial, you can't just spring up with kind of new stuff, and it's prejudicial to the defendant, all this kind of stuff. And of course, Baker's a lawyer, and he knows the system very well. He knows exactly how to do this. So and you know, it's not a big leap from there to think that that was planned. Because of course he knew that there was a text message. He knew that all along, but he somehow never mentioned it right up until the beginning of the trial. So, and why did he mention it at all? Well, just to protect himself. What if it comes out some other way? So he wants to just sort of make sure he's protected. And then the same thing happened in Danchenko. And that's why it's like a pattern in this, that it's like they knew, by they, I mean the FBI, DOJ, higher echelons, people like that, they knew that both these cases aren't going to be a problem, because in both these cases, they had this sort of emergency, brake mechanism built in. So Baker in the one case, and in the Danchenko case, it was this guy called Kevin Helson. So Kevin Helson is an FBI agent who was Danchenko's handler. So this is the other thing that came out, as George mentioned at the outset, that Danchenko was made an FBI employee. And the purpose of making him that, right as when they found him, instead of turning the screws on him and going, hey, buddy, what did you do with that dossier? And what's up with Steele? And really turning the screws on him. Plus, remember, he's a Russian guy. You can squeeze him on the visa. You can do all that. What came out at trial is that he had these immigration infractions because he didn't leave the country after his visa expired, and on and on and on. They could have really turned the screws on him. No, what they did is they made him an FBI employee. Thereby, they hid him away. He's gone. And they hid him from congressional inquiries, and they hid him from Horowitz, and they hid him from everyone. Okay, so Kevin Helson became his handler at that point. And Kevin Helson is, he's been described to me by people who were in the courtroom, kind of either as an extremely dishonest FBI agent, or as someone who drank the Kool-Aid, like a true believer. But whichever it is, Kevin Helson completely destroyed Durham's case within a few minutes, because he said, he was asked by the defense counsel, and it was almost as if this was planned. If you look at the transcript, I mean, it almost looks like they practiced this. Kevin Helson was asked, did Danchenko lie about Dolan? No, he didn't lie. Did Danchenko lie about Millian? The other lie? No, that was, he used a phone app. No, that was not. So but at that point, the game is over, because Durham's own witness has just now said, no, he didn't lie. That the thing he's charged with. So in both cases, Durham's own witnesses destroyed his case.
Yeah, but you just said, I like the phrase here that, he drank the Kool-Aid, but see, that's the problem with all of this here. Everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid because, there's the rule of law on the one hand, but then there's Trump. Okay, it's all this Trump derangement syndrome. Because the way I've looked at it, and the only time I'll ever really compliment Sean Hannity, because I appreciate that he did every single night after night, he would add the extra layer. George and I know it by heart. I'm sure you do too. But at the end of the day, they did the right thing because it was Trump, and that's what's so chilling here, because then there's a precedent is, it's like the Trump, we have to invoke the Trump precedent right now, the rule of law, everything must fall apart. That is truly disastrous. And I remember saying that when the dossier was made public. I said, this is going to crush institutions and traditions that we've had legally. And we've all been proven right here, because they all drank the Kool-Aid. No matter what you do, whatever you say, it's for the cause.
No, that's exactly right. And I believe that, probably 80% of them did drink the Kool-Aid, because they've been brainwashed about Trump, or a lot of these people are not very smart. I mean, they're just genuinely not very smart when you look at what they did and their answers. And just look at this Peter Strzok fellow when he goes on TV. I mean, that guy's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So that's a problem for sure. But not all of them are dumb. I mean, there are some smart ones, and there needs to be some brain behind it. I mean, how is it that all of these doofuses, if we want to call them that, all happen to get it wrong in the same direction? If you just have doofuses, they're going to sometimes mess up this way, sometimes going to mess up that way. No, they all messed up in the same direction. It was like as if they were chosen because they were doofuses that were always going to go in that one direction. And then you think, who's behind that? And one fellow who's not been looked at enough is Andrew McCabe, the deputy director. We talked about the ICA earlier. He was pushing very, very hard for that to go into the dossier. as if he was part of some bigger plan of, we need to make this happen. He was the one who opened an investigation into Trump personally. I mean, he was the one who briefed Congress much later in 2018. Again, just lies after lies. Was he the one? He was working with Lisa Page. Lisa Page was with Strzok. Was she kind of a spy figuring out what Strzok is going on, or kind of as a conduit? I mean, we don't know so many things, but we know that something more was going on in those higher echelons. And I completely agree with you. Durham's job was to figure that out, to tell us there was a conspiracy among Comey, McCabe, Strzok, whatever. Maybe Strzok was just an idiot. Maybe he wasn't part of the conspiracy. Who knows? But it was his job to figure it out. And we know about that part. We only know there is something there, but we don't know what it is.
Right, but something that has come up, and you brought this up, but it's a very important point that is insufficiently highlighted. The story is, and the New York Times keeps repeating this ad nauseum, that Operation Crossfire Hurricane was launched because this Australian guy, Downer, he has this boozy lunch with George Papadopoulos, and then 2 months later, when he reads about this release of these DNC documents, he says, "Whoa, that's what Papadopoulos was talking about." So he calls the FBI, and the FBI launched Operation Crossfire Hurricane. The New York Times sticks to that story, but as you have pointed out, that actually isn't true. The investigation of Trump began before that, and the Steele dossier was really instrumental in that start of that investigation. It wasn't the Papadopoulos lunch that actually launched Crossfire Hurricane.
Exactly. And we have documentary proof, the thing we always want to have. There is a text message from Strzok to Page, his lover, and it's not only investigation, it talks about our investigations, plural, of Trump, before Downer, before Crossfire Hurricane. So, what was he talking about? No one's in the New York Times doesn't seem to be interested in figuring out why is he sending messages before the opening of the inquiry. And of course, as we mentioned already, they already got the Steele dossier a month earlier. So the Papadopoulos thing was a convenient excuse that look, these people get tips all the time. And this was a particularly useful tip because it came from a credible person. They basically used the fact that Alexander Downer is a credible person to make it something that it wasn't. So that basically the whole tip wasn't about the tip. The tip is ridiculous. It's about the credibility of the person making the tip. That's the entire thing. The tip itself was, Papadopoulos said that the Russians might release information that might be damaging to Hillary Clinton. I mean, everyone in Washington was talking about exactly that.
Exactly.
It's kind of like, it's like when I look at Papadopoulos and Carter Page, they're kind of like the dressing on a Christmas tree. I mean, it's still a tree, I mean, it's just the extra that you put on it to give a little bit of drama and show that it's all pervasive, even to the lowest levels of the campaign. This is the night of the body snatchers. Because they didn't care about these individuals, obviously, and they were expendable, but they gave substance to the story that was outside of what is it? What is it? The main office in the FBI? Okay, I mean, it's like, look over here. Look, it's so pervasive. This guy. That's the way I look at it.
No, and I think that's exactly right. And I think the other thing that is worth doing sometimes is just like let's zoom out and look at the 30,000-foot view here. Why were they doing any of this at all? So we know they started before Crossfire Hurricane, and we know Steele had something to do with it before Crossfire Hurricane. But why was all this happening at all? And they've admitted that what they were trying to do is figure out whether Team Trump had Hillary's 30,000 emails, which aren't all about yoga and a wedding. They're about very bad things, and no one's ever seen them. And that's what they were trying to figure out. But since when is it the job of a law enforcement agency to figure out whether one team has bad info on the other team?
Right.
That's the core of it.
Well, they were looking at Biden's daughter's diary. I mean, I think it's a new element of the FBI's purview. It looks like.
No, that's a fantastic comparison, because that's pretty much exactly the same thing that happened there. Or to disprove this Hunter Biden laptop. Again, that's political, opposition research. That's all it is.
Right.
And again, the FBI inserted itself into that process by telling Facebook, not to publish that stuff.
Right. So now Comey, he's really, he's central in this. Like, he knows that there's no proof for Steele's allegations, but he signs off on this FISA warrant against Carter Page. And then when is it, in March 2017, that he testifies on Congress, and he sort of suggests that Trump is under investigation. And then he's desperate to get a special counsel appointed. Comey knows that really there's nothing to any of this, but he's already moving, suggesting that, Trump is under investigation, and he wants a special counsel appointed. So Comey kind of seems to play a very sinister role in all of this.
No, I agree with you, but he's smarter than McCabe, and he's smarter than the rest of them, because he put some distance between himself and everything else. So it's very difficult to pin him down on things. So even though he went to Congress in March of 2017 and he blatantly lied to them, so he didn't tell them about the $1 million. He didn't tell them about Danchenko having disavowed the dossier. He didn't tell them that Danchenko had been hidden away. Danchenko didn't exist in that briefing. He also lied to them by saying that the source is Russian-based. The source was actually a Brookings Institution guy. Didn't mention that. There were several other lies, but he had a talking point memo kind of thing. And other people wrote that. So he's going to say, "Ooh, sorry, I'm just a director. I just read what I was told here," And so every step of the way, Comey is a very, very careful operator. But I agree with you. The evidence overall shows that this was very carefully planned and staged, probably by him, maybe with the help of McCabe. Again, this was what Durham was supposed to find out and tell us. And, maybe his report will tell us those things, but, that's no good if those people aren't also prosecuted. One thing Comey did very carefully right at the outset is get Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, out of the door, like get rid of him. You don't do that unless you already have a plan as to what's going to follow. Jeff Sessions was extremely stupid because he was asked to recuse and he just recused. What do you do if you're asked to recuse? The first thing you ask is, what for? What are you investigating? Is there something worth investigating that I'm supposed to recuse for? Like, let me see. Let's have a look here. And of course, he never did that. He just ran out the door immediately. Yeah. And that opened the door for them to, then they got Rosenstein, and, he was just a scaredy cat. He would just do whatever they wanted or whatever the media wanted, or, whoever. We have these emails between Rosenstein and the media. They seemed very friendly. So they knew who they had. They knew where the pieces of on the chessboard. They played this really, really well.
And Rosenstein's memo, the one that was redacted and then unredacted, it was a very sweeping. It wasn't a very narrowly focused thing. It pretty much gave Mueller complete blank check. You can just go after everybody involved with Trump, whatever grounds, however tangentially involved it is with the Trump campaign in Russia.
And
no, that's exactly right.
At the same time, he was probably very much aware that Mueller had deteriorated in so many ways, and that there would be other people that would be driving it. He knew that he would be a figurehead in all of this, and that was the whole point is to make sure that Trump wasn't elected, and then he was, and that was the surprise. And then they've had this sloppy job of trying to cover their tracks. But they have the establishment behind them. They have almost all of the media behind them. This is so all blatant. I'll speak for George and I, at least. We remember Watergate. This is like a gazillion times far worse than Watergate. But, it doesn't percolate up to the top. And that is very corrosive for moving forward. Because as George and I have been saying on the Gaggle here, how many more elections will the FBI get a medal in?
No, that's right. And I mean, 2020 we know was as bad. It was probably worse than 2016 because it was so overt what they did with Hunter's laptop. But there is, I mean, Durham did leave us kind of one evidence trail that may be useful and where we might be able to do something or someone might be able to pick it up. So for instance, if the GOP was worth anything and if they're going to take over Congress, they could really do something with it. And I don't mean Comey and the FBI, because of, you know, covering themselves and all these kinds of, it's just difficult to get at them. But they could go after Mueller and his team. So one of the things we found out is that Mueller blatantly lied, and he did it. I mean, we all saw it on July 24, 2019, when he went to Congress. By the way, that's pretty recent. So the statute of limitations runs until 2024. So there's still plenty of time to charge him or at least squeeze him. Well, first of all, bring him under oath and like just squeeze him as to why did you lie? So there's many lies, but the one that really came out on Friday, just this past Friday, was that Mueller was asked in Congress in 2019, did you guys look at the Steele dossier? He was like, Steele dossier? Never heard of it. Or what's that fact? No, not my purview. No, not my purview. And this is repeated. This is not just like, oh, I got that one answer wrong. You know, if you look at the transcript, there was like, no, nothing. So, well, we found out on Friday that not only was Mueller looking at the Steele dossier, he had a whole team looking at the Steele dossier. At least 5 people fully devoted just to Steele dossier. They flew out to Cyprus to talk to one of these alleged sources. They found out about Dolan being involved, Dolan being one of the sources. That's a big problem because Dolan is a Clinton crony. He's a Clinton operative. Suddenly the Clinton operative is a source for the dossier, which they used to spy on the Trump campaign. That's very, very bad. So they had to bury all that. So first of all, one of the agents was stopped from investigating Dolan, and she had her notes and her memo destroyed. It was destroyed. That's absolutely terrible. And the first time we heard of it was on Friday in court because she had since left the FBI. I guess she wasn't under that pressure anymore. And she just said, look, I tried to investigate Dolan. Mueller shut it down. They destroyed my documents. That's all I can say. Tells, you know, and the poor lady had to leave. She was like, okay, I'm done here. And she just left the FBI. What sort of management culture is it where this can happen? And the person is so scared, they don't come forward. There's no proper whistleblower mechanism, unless it's against Trump. Then, you know, of course, anything's possible. And even then, I think she left in 2019. You know, it took her 3 more years to really, you know, come out with this story. But again, coming back to the main point, that's the sort of witness that could be very valuable and at least going after Mueller and his thugs. And that's not the only thing they did. I mean, as I said, there's many lies. One of the other things that came out sort of indirectly through the trial was through Sergey Milyan himself. So in the past few days, he's posted some communications he's had with Mueller's team.
To give some background, Sergey Milyan, he's the head of a kind of a Russian-American business council or roundtable, and he was named as a source by both Steele and by Danchenko. So he was supposed to be the man really there with his finger on the pulse of the Kremlin. Wasn't that right? That's what Milyan, that was the allegation against Milyan.
Yeah, that was the allegations against him. And he was in the real estate business in the past, and he had sold Trump apartments. So there's photos of him and Trump, and, you know, so they could tie him to Trump, even though it's kind of a very sort of peripheral tie. Okay, that was useful to them. Then he was head of this Russian American Chamber of Commerce. So that's, you know, that's a front group or whatever. You can come up with all kinds of excuses. So they had enough there already to then basically frame him to say, well, he's our man. He told us that there was a conspiracy, there was collusion, there was a P-tape, the WikiLeaks, all these main stories all came from Sergey Milyan. And it was all a lie because Sergey Milyan never ever talked to these people. And so he was just set up. So again, Mueller could not afford to talk to Sergey Milyan because as soon as he talked to Sergey Milyan, everything collapses because Sergey is going to say, look, I never talked to these people. Check my phone, check my emails, do anything. I have no idea who these people are. And at that point, you know, it just blows up. It's terrible. So Mueller had to avoid talking to him. But Mueller also had to pretend that he talked to him. So in their report, they wrote, oh, we tried to talk to him, but we weren't able to reach him. You know, and so Sergey probably saw that, you know, what came out last week at the trial, and he had enough. So he posted some things online. And there were plenty of communications between Mueller and Sergey. So they lied about that as well. The only reason it didn't make it into the report was, again, because they didn't want to expose the fact that Sergei, if they had talked to him, like maybe they did talk about those things, but if they'd done a formal interview, he would have just blown it all up. So again, there are very real, tangible points here at which you can go after Mueller and this whole Mueller team. And this is documented stuff.
Yeah,
this is not like someone say so. So that is something for someone to pick up. And obviously Durham's not going to do it for reasons.
Well, then who's the person that's going to pick it up? That's my problem here. I mean, as usual, the Republicans talk big, okay? And then they do very little, okay? And to both of you, do you think Lindsey Graham is going to get ahead on it?
No, he won't.
No, because it goes back to my point earlier. They may say, yeah, you shouldn't have done that. That was bad. You shouldn't have done that. But we have to preserve the FBI. Okay, the FBI is a pristine operation. Unfortunately, as they always like to say, some bad apples. Church commission in all of this here. I just don't.
Yeah. Well, I guess, in the House, maybe the House Judiciary Committee under the leadership of Jim Jordan. I think he'll take over as the chairman. Maybe they'll do something, but the DOJ, the Biden DOJ, isn't going to touch any of this. So you can make any kind of referrals for criminal prosecution to the Biden DOJ. They're not going to do it, and there won't be a Republican president till 2025. So there's not much you can do other than hold hearings.
Well, and then if everything ends up in a DC court, well, that's just a fool's errand.
No, that's right. But that's why you need to practice what Democrats do, which is what they call lawfare, like warfare, but with law. Yeah. When you just really, what Mueller did. Then it doesn't matter if it's DC court or whatever. If you go after people because of their tax problems or because of whatever other issues they have, totally unrelated to what we're actually talking about, then you get their attention, and it's also much easier to convict because it's not a political thing. You could just, what they did to Manafort, what they did to various of these other people, where they just went after them for these unrelated issues. Cohen, Trump's lawyer, they did that with him as well. He had some taxi medallion scheme or whatever. What's that got to do with Russia collusion? But they got him to compose. They got him to tell stories by doing that. So is anyone on the GOP side going to be able to do that? First of all, of course, you're right. Up until 2025, there's going to be nothing on the sort of through DOJ because there's going to be it's the wrong president. And we don't know what's going to happen in 2025. The one bit of good news here is that because Danchenko was deliberately concealed from public view until 2020, you could say the conspiracy ran on until that time, October 2020. So the statute of limitations on that particular aspect runs at least until October of 2025. So whoever the new president is going to be is going to have a little bit of time there to do something. Look, I'm as pessimistic as you guys, as nothing's going to happen. But at least we've charted here, a couple of pathways of you could still salvage something if you wanted to.
Well, yeah, I know this sounds maybe kind of trite, but there is a sense of gratification that, you more than anyone else that I know figured it out. Okay, it really did happen. Okay, we have the skeleton of it all. Maybe there's could always be more flesh you can put on those bones, but we figured it out, and I take satisfaction from that. But it does tell me that if the FBI ever knocks on my door, I'm not going to answer it. Okay.
So, Hans, what happens today? Will the charges be dismissed or will it go to the jury and the jury will acquit?
Yeah, I think it's going to go to the jury, and the jury will either acquit or the jury will convict, and then the judge will acquit. This is the same judge, by the way. This is a guy called Trenga, a Bush 43 appointee. He's known for this stuff, and he did it once at least in the right way. So when there's this sort of side story in Mueller about Turkey lobbying, which is absolute rubbish, because Michael Flynn once wrote an op-ed And supposedly that was lobbying, but he was paid by a private businessman. And the private businessman has said many, many times over, this was just me, I'm a Turkish patriot. I just wanted him to write that. So I paid for that. I wasn't instructed by anyone. I wasn't directed by anyone, and so on. Anyway, long story short is that in that connection, a guy was charged by Mueller, and his name was Rafikian. And he was convicted by the jury, probably because the jury thought, oh, look, there's a Turkish guy and, strange foreigner, whatever, let's just convict her. It's very complicated in terms of whether he should have registered or not or whatever. It sounds nefarious, let's convict. And then the same judge, Trenga, immediately, as soon as the jury said that, said, no, this is ridiculous. He didn't do anything. And he just acquitted him like on the spot. So Trenga has already suggested that he was going to do that anyway. So that I think, either one way or the other, Danchenko walks. There's very little hope that, he gets convicted. If I say hope, I don't necessarily even have that hope. I mean, let's face it, he did lie. He did lie about a couple of these things. And the main reason appears to be that he wanted to, it was out of embarrassment. So he lied about Million because he never actually met Million. And it's probably just embarrassing that, he did that. So he came up with this fictitious phone call, like, no, I spoke to him on the phone, and it never happened. Anyway, it's kind of a white lie, just makes some little problem go away. The big thing he did was that he exposed the Steele dossier right at the get-go, January 2017, because he told the FBI at that time, no, this is not real. This is just bar talk. No, this is what, you shouldn't take this seriously. And at that point, he blew up the Steele dossier. So why did Durham go after the people who exposed the fraud, even if they lied a little bit, instead of going after the people who perpetuated the fraud, Comey and so on? So you could turn the whole thing around that way.
And what's the answer to that question? Why?
Yeah, no, we don't know what the answer to that question is. We had these different possibilities, including that he was being stymied by Garland, or that he just made some strategic blunders. We just don't know. But in terms of Danchenko, I mean, my expectation is that he's going to walk.
Is that what Bill Barr instructed him to do? I mean, what were Bill Barr's instructions to Durham when he?
Well, initially they were very broad. They were like, get to the bottom of this Russia hoax, and he mentioned FBI leadership, and he mentioned why they acted the way they did, why they hid stuff, concealed stuff, lied, or all of those things. He was very explicit. If you look at some of these early Barr interviews, he was really pushing for this stuff. And then for some reason that we don't understand, something happened.
Yep.
Will there be a report? Will Durham be allowed to publish his report?
Well, Garland decides whether it gets published or not. Maybe because of all these revelations last week, Durham was hoping to, increase the pressure that Garland will feel that he must publish. But, as you guys said earlier, the media isn't even talking about any of this. So what kind of pressure? It's amongst people like us. It's a pretty small kind of corner of the wider spectrum of people who understand what the issues are and how this is important. I mean, is there going to be an outcry like with Mueller? Like in Mueller, it wasn't not about publishing. Barr was like, yeah, sure, we'll publish, no problem. It was about certain redactions. Oh, that redaction, whatever. And do you remember what a huge hoo-ha the media caused about like a redaction here or there, or the summary wasn't as perfect as it could have been or whatever? Yeah. And turn that around. Now, if Garland says, no, this is, this Durham, this is not right, we're not going to publish the report, and it's entirely his choice. Is the media going to cry? Of course not.
Yeah. They'll even say the opposite. They'll say, because there was nothing there. That's why.
Exactly. Right. And the media are going to be very gleeful today when he's acquitted. They say, hey, Durham has struck out. Nothing. So, the only thing he did, he got a conviction of Kevin Kleinsmith, but even that didn't really mean very much because Kleinsmith is back to practicing law. I mean, he didn't even get disbarred for forging federal documents.
Yeah. All will end with a whimper, I am afraid.
So can we make
maybe a good segue to January 6th, George?
Well, let's before that, let's go to the documents, the presidential documents. What's happening there? I mean, we've been, we have the special master. Then that was kind of overturned by the 11th Circuit, and now it's gone to the Supreme Court. So again, it's quite confusing as to where are we now with the documents case.
Yeah, and the Supreme Court has said no, they're not gonna hear it.
Why did they say that? Why did the Supreme Court not want to hear it?
Because it's very unusual for the Supreme Court to intervene before the court below, the appeals court, says anything. Okay. I mean, at least they're going to wait until, if they are going to intervene, it's just like collegiality or whatever, you're going to wait for your colleagues beneath to say, up or down, and then you move forward. I mean, right now, everything is just sort of on an interlocutory basis, which means like, nothing's been decided yet. Everything is just sort of in the meantime kind of judgments. We'll hold off on this in the meantime. We're going to do this in the meantime. So that's kind of where it is. I don't think the Supreme Court is going to weigh in until things are set in stone. And even then, will they really do something to kind of save Trump here? Probably not, given the facts of the situation. And the facts are pretty simple. Trump was given. Was asked by this National Archives back in January to hand over stuff that he brought to Mar-a-Lago. Now, the time to object would have been then. All these excuses we're hearing, oh, but the president has a right to these documents, and the president doesn't have to share, and the president can declassify, all these kinds of excuses. That's when these excuses should have been mentioned. That was the time. Like, no, Nara, we're not going to give you back anything because this is rightfully Trump's. And then they could have fought it out. But stupidly, Trump or his legal advisors, whoever, said, no, we'll cooperate. And they sent back some boxes. And of course, the boxes were not complete, and there were things missing, and obviously missing, and so on. So at that time, Nara went to DOJ and said, look, there's pages so-and-so, and then there's something missing and whatever. Now, again, I don't even want to argue with people. People are going to come and shout at me like, oh, they made it up, or, they're setting him up, they're setting up Trump, whatever. That's all possible. But then don't cooperate with Nara, because you opened the door to this kind of stuff. And then the DOJ said, oh, this is terrible. Let's get a subpoena. So then they sent him a subpoena in May and said, okay, now you have to hand over everything that's left over, anything whatsoever at all that has the words classified written on it. And they made it clear, it doesn't matter whether it's classified or not. We don't care. It's just the word has to be on it. So marked classified. And again, if that would have been a good time to say, no, we're not going to hand anything over because everything is declassified. The president has a right to do. They didn't do that. Once again, they pretended that they were going to cooperate. Yeah, no problem. We're going to cooperate with the subpoena. We're going to hand everything over. And then very stupidly, they made one of their lawyers, Trump's lawyers, signed a certification that yeah, everything has been handed over. And then they did the raid. That was the third step. And then the raid found stuff that wasn't handed over. And again, people are just going to say, oh, they planted it or whatever. Doesn't matter. I don't think they did, but it doesn't matter. If you're going to come up with all these excuses, come up with them at the front end, not at the back end of the process. If you purport to cooperate along all, at every step, and then something didn't work out, then you're going to get, done in on these technicalities. You're going to get, so the lawyer is in trouble.
Lawfare.
Yeah, exactly. Lawfare. So the lawyer is in trouble. And right when it happened on August 8th, and I think we got the document the next day or so, and I immediately said, this is very, very bad, because the lawyer said, we handed everything over and you didn't. So that's going to be a big problem. And I said, they're going to talk to this lawyer and turn the screws on this lawyer. And then what did we hear last week? They brought the lawyer to Washington, D.C. and had a big interview, and the lawyer had a legal representation, all this kind of stuff. And we don't know what exactly was said. We only know about the leaks of what was said, but essentially the leaks are that the lawyer blamed another lawyer. So she said, this is the lawyer that used to work for the One America Network. For all I know, I'm sure she's a fantastic, lovely lady, everything, right? Yeah. She said she was called, she had no idea about any of these things. Nara, no idea. She was called by another lawyer one day saying, please come to Mar-a-Lago right now. I need you to sign something. And that's how her signature came to be on that document. Now, if that is true, why would the other lawyer not feel comfortable signing it himself, right? So anyway, where we are right now is that the other lawyer is now going to be brought to Washington, D.C.
Who's the other lawyer? Because I think the woman is, this Christina Bobb.
That's right.
I think she's been on Laura Ingraham and so on. But who's the other lawyer? Who's the one?
His name is Cochran. and I mean, again, I don't know whether this is how it's been reported. I don't know if he, whatever happened there, but he will now be brought in by the FBI, and they're going to say, hey, Mr. Cochran, so what exactly happened there? Why did you call in Christina Bobb at the last minute and ask her to sign this thing? Why didn't you sign it yourself? Who told you? Blah, blah, blah. And of course, what they want Cochran to say is, well, Trump told me. Yeah. And so Trump has put himself at the mercy of these lawyers once more. Yeah. And all he should have done, to be honest, is just not cooperate right from the get-go. Have that fight back in January. Say, no, Nara, you're not going to get anything.
Do you think Trump just wanted a pretty girl to sign it?
Well,
I'm serious. It's a serious.
I think, Peter, you're right. I think this is a big weakness on Trump's part. He likes being surrounded by these very pretty girls, and they lead him to disaster every time. I mean, so many of these beautiful young women that he surrounds himself with, they all do him in at some point or another.
Because the rationale would be is that if something goes wrong, she'll be on TV for me. And she was.
Well, I'll say this. I find it very odd that Trump, it seems to, his hiring practices seem to be very much focused on people he saw on TV. Yep. Like if you're on Fox News, then you can get hired if you whatever that. That narrows your pool of people considerably.
That's how we got John Bolton, everybody. He saw him on Tucker.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the only reason he hired John Bolton. He switched on the telly one day and he saw John Bolton and said, oh, this is a good guy. And he hires John Bolton.
Yeah, no, we have unfortunately many examples of that. Sebastian Gorka being one. I mean, look, again, I'm sure Sebastian Gorka is a fantastic guy, but he was only hired because he was on Fox News. There's no question about that. So, no, these are big problems for Trump, but now he's at the mercy of this Cochran guy. So whatever Cochran going to take it on himself? Say, well, I was just careless or whatever. He can say that, and he might get an ethics complaint, maybe worse, who knows? Or he might wash his hands and say, no, this other lawyer told me. So we're kind of peeling back the onion. Or he's going to say, no, Trump told me. I don't know. Who knows?
But a lawyer can't really blame his client, because the client says, look, I'm not an expert. I rely on professional advice from lawyers. That's why I pay these huge fees. So a lawyer can't say, well, I was acting on instruction, because that's not an excuse. He's the lawyer. He's the one who's supposed to be authorized to make the certification.
Yeah, but the client does give instructions, and then there's this problem that Trump is known for not paying his lawyers. So there's that creates issues in terms of maybe not so much loyalty, but just how you approach a problem, how professional you are about stuff. If Trump, for some of these problems that he's had, had just hired a big firm, like absolute professionals who just do things in a very regimented way, he would have avoided many of these problems. But it's always kind of this haphazard group of kind of lawyers that he, met at the golf course or met, saw on TV or, whatever. And then he gets into these kinds of problems. So, I have no idea if someone's going to blame him or not. But as you say, I mean, he has ultimately Trump has the excuse of, I told the lawyers just to do everything by the book and, that's it. But did he really say that? Or did he say, no, look, these documents are really, really important to me. I really want to keep those Kim Jong-un letters or whatever. And I don't think there's anything terrible in those documents. It's more like memorabilia and things like that.
Covers of magazines and editorial cartoons all about Donald Trump. That's what I think mostly it is. Okay.
Right. And so he might
have said, everybody, do you think that Donald Trump in the evening retires and say, I want to take a look at what we did with housing back in 2019, they pull out the documents? No, he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that.
No. Okay. that really isn't Trump.
Yeah. So it's possible that he told the lawyers, no, I really, really want to keep these documents, make sure that happens or make it happen somehow or whatever. But again, if that is what happened, then he should have objected, or the lawyers should have objected back in January. So, I mean, I think, George, your point is really well taken, that ultimately it's probably not going to come down to Trump. It's going to come down to some lawyer who messed up, and, they're going to, that's probably how it's going to end up. Unless they have, I mean, there's this talk of having this witness who saw Trump move things. Yeah. Of course, after the subpoena came down and after they told him to lock up this area where these boxes were, if Trump in the middle of the night went down and grabbed a few boxes and carried them, I don't believe that. But let's say all that happened, and if it's on tape, and then it might be a problem. But also, as Peter said, he doesn't do that. It's not like, oh, I want to see the unredacted Carter Page FISA because I want to research exactly what Comey said there.
Right.
No, what he's doing is that I have to run Hannity's on in 5 minutes. That's what he's going to do.
But those documents, because it seems like those documents that he had declassified, those were the Russiagate documents. Now that in the hands of the DOJ, so does that mean we're never going to see them? Is that unless Trump is back in the White House and then he again declassifies? Because otherwise, how are we ever going to see any of these declassified Russiagate documents?
Yeah, I don't think we will, and I don't think John Durham has them either. I mean, we know from these the trials that he's run that he himself has had problems accessing not only declassified but also unredacted documents, and he himself says he doesn't have access to these things. Yeah, there was this binder, January 19th, the day before Trump left office, and he had this big binder of all the Russiagate stuff. And for inexplicable reasons, they gave it back to DOJ with an acknowledgement. And if you read the acknowledgement, I mean, I fell off my tree reading it. This was signed by the chief of staff at the time, Mark Meadows. And he says, oh, we're giving it back to you because of your concerns. And we share those concerns about, privacy and this and that. Why? I don't get it.
Yeah.
But Assange as well. I don't get that either. Why didn't he? Maybe for the same reason. I think, Peter, you have a theory on Assange. Maybe the same reason applied here.
Yeah, well, if I had been Trump, seriously, I would have been holding it in my arms, walking up the stairs to his plane, okay, and turned to the reporters and pointed at it, okay, but he didn't, and he had every right to it.
Right. The Assange, though, was, I think, a little different because I think he was facing conviction in the Senate on January the 19th, just before the end of his presidency. If he had pardoned Assange, I think enough Republicans would have deserted him and he would have been convicted in the impeachment trial. He only needed to lose 10. He was only 10 short of being convicted. I mean, 57 voted to convict. So 10 more Republicans and he'd have been, that's it, convicted.
Just to add, I think 10 are neocons.
Yeah, I mean, Lindsey Graham for sure would have voted to convict. And there'd be some others, that guy, the North Carolina guy, and, all of these who were all anti-Trump people, they hated Trump. They would have voted to convict if he'd have pardoned Assange.
Yeah, and then it may be similar with this big binder of documents. I mean, it's supposed to be very thick and supposed to have all the Russiagate stuff in there. So what if he had walked out? I mean, it's possible that on January 20th, the media would have had a giant meltdown because of leaks or whatever, FBI, DOJ saying, oh my God, Trump stole all these top secret documents and look, and then that might have had an impact on those neocons and on the vote in Senate. I don't know, but I mean, he certainly wasn't himself in those last few days.
Right.
Oh, come on, let's face it, you guys. The Republican senators, they popped bottles of champagne on January 20th, and then the nightmare was over, okay? And one of the things I always say, if we bring up what's going on with the Comey's testimony, oh, that's a long time ago. That's ancient history. Yeah. And anyway, he's gone. It's for better. It's better even for the Republican Party. You hear that all the time.
Right. And I suppose that's kind of a segue for a last topic, which is January the 6th. Where do we stand there?
Well, there's the kind of last embers burning, right? You had,
right. But in terms of the DOJ, I mean, the DOJ have been threatening to bring some kind of criminal charges against Trump for January the 6th. I mean, is that any likelihood of that?
Yeah, I don't think so, because there's just nothing there. They're just going to embarrass themselves. Plus, they've burned a lot of political capital on this whole Mar-a-Lago raid thing. Are they going to do it again on something which is where there's far less evidence? At least in Mar-a-Lago, you can show that the certification was signed and the stuff we talked about. I mean, what is there on January 6th? It's just
they haven't shown any evidence.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's the point. I mean, I forgot the number, 18,000 hours of video.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think after the midterms, that's just gonna fade away, that whole topic. I mean, of course, Democrats will bring it up as, insurrection was horrible thing ever and so on. But in terms of they tried the PR route. They had these hearings, they had everything, and people just aren't interested. So they're gonna find something else.
Yes.
What's really sad, gentlemen, is that there's still people being prosecuted for it. So when the last ambers go out, as you said, and they will, look at the human tragic loss of a lot of elderly people, poor people, veterans, and they will be left to languish because the gambit didn't work. Oh, well, let's move on. Okay. I find that really, really sad and pathetic.
Yeah, I find it terribly sad. You had this one lady, suffering from cancer, just a grandma from Idaho or whatever, and she was just there, and big Trump fan, and a lot of these people obviously are, or all of them are, and she just saw the door. I don't know, I might have walked in, the door's open, everyone's going in, that's interesting, let's take some photos or whatever,
Exactly.
And she ended up in jail. And there's so many like her. And no, I think it's absolutely tragic and many of them will still be in jail, in a few years' time when people, stop talking about this. Maybe Trump, coming back to those things, right? Trump should have preemptively pardoned everyone. I mean, it could have been a very broad pardon, right? Yeah. Any non-violent people like capital tourists, selfie tourists are hereby pardoned, But then, as George said, then he would have been convicted. But does that matter? Shouldn't he have just pardoned everyone and Assange and gotten everything released and Russiagate and everything and just take it on? I mean, take the hit. Like, okay, so then they're going to convict me. Whatever. I can't run again. Right. No, he didn't want that because he wants to run again.
It's. I'm sorry, gentlemen, but it's always about Trump. Okay.
Yeah. Right. No, he's completely self-absorbed. There's no question about that. The other day, he was accused of being an anti-Semite. It was ridiculous, just because he said that he did so much for Israel and the Jews should understand that or whatever, words to that effect. Right. And of course, there was a big problem with that message, no doubt, but it had nothing to do with anti-Semitism, whatever. The big problem was it was completely self-absorbed. Right. I mean, the very first sentence was like, no one understands how much I've done, right. And on and on. It's always like that with him. And in my view, is if he wants to run again, he's going to have to address that. Because I do think, he's going to have a core group of fans who are never going to, question anything. But that core group has gotten smaller over the past, few years. And I think in the background, it's getting smaller still, especially if this sort of the self-absorbedness, just keeps going on and on.
Right. But I don't think in terms of his core supporters, they're all fanatically pro-Israel anyway. So I don't think they're going to be, in any way distressed by that message. Which all he really said is that, hey, American Jews should be a lot more pro-Israeli than they are. Most people thought they're already pretty pro-Israeli. Richard Nixon was actually harsher on that. He says, after what I've done for Israel, and still the Jews all hate me. And so, but Nixon actually had more of an genuinely anti-Semitic tendencies than Trump himself.
Yep. It always gets down to Trump. It's very interesting. So far, he's like a cat that always lands on his feet. We have to admit that. Every single thing they've thrown at him has failed, okay? But does it make him damaged goods? That's up to voters to decide. But it's really interesting how the state can marshal so many resources to corner one guy. And it's like, he's like the roadrunner. He always finds a way to elude a capture.
Right, because there are other cases. There's the case in Georgia. They're still looking into the whole thing of what he was trying to perpetrate some sort of electoral fraud in Georgia. That's all nonsensical. They're doing that. Then you've still got the civil suit being brought by New York State. That's obviously not going anywhere. This entire resources of government are being devoted in order to hobble Trump.
It's one of the things I find really interesting. I guess you guys have been following it. Election collusion with Biden trying to convince the Saudis to delay the cut in production. Well, I'm sorry, but that's how things work in politics. I mean, go back to the Trump-Zelensky conversation, and then you have the Biden-Saudi conversation. That's the makings of politics. Everything, everyone, listen closely, everything is a quid pro quo. Everything in politics, okay? So I really find it really quite hilarious watching so-called conservatives say, this is election interference. I mean, everything is election interference, okay? The problem is not when the FBI does it, okay? That's the difference for me, okay? But, for a politician, yeah, that's the greasy part of politics, and it's in time immemorial. If we had the power, could we release every single telephone call an American president have had since Harry Truman? And you know what, everyone? You're going to see the same thing over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. No, that's right. And FDR talked to Stalin in 1944 about Poland. He said, "Hey, I've got an election to fight, so just go easy on the border changes and the government that you want to have Poland, because that's going to cause problems for me with my Polish supporters." So yeah.
Well, to get real nerdy, George, even Stalin knew that, and he played to that. He said, "I know you have midterms coming up." He did that. He knew how to deal with his interlocutor. Okay, every single type. All right. So, but my point is that you can't be sanctimonious one moment and not be sanctimonious on another when it's the same thing. But I want to really stress here. I mean, the malfeasance of the FBI should terrify all of us. There should be a church commission. It has to be taken apart and rebuilt, okay, because of what its mission is right now. Look, I lived in communist Eastern Europe for 10 years. It reminds me very much of the Stasi, okay, from someone that lived in an environment like that for many years.
Right. No, I think that's right, because I think that, the characteristic of these this Soviet systems was that the secret police was really not under any political control. I mean, even the people at the top were terrified of the secret police. It's like, what does the KGB have on me? You may be at the top of the tree in the Politburo, but you don't know what the KGB actually has on you. And so it's kind of similar. Hey, I may have won an election, but the FBI has the ultimate power. They can just destroy me and destroy my presidency.
Yeah, no, that's right. And what one of the things that's emerged from all this, for those people who say, I think the whole thing just should be shut down and just rebuilt from the scratch because it's that broken. And some people say, oh, that's too extreme or whatever. Well, then start with the counterintelligence side. So the FBI used to be into criminal stuff. That was their, that was their domain. And after 9/11, they started really expanding on the counterintelligence side and building up lots of resources there. The problem with, and then those two areas cross over all the time. But counterintelligence, by its nature, is basically nothing. It's just rumors. It's just people like Danchenko, people like Steele, all this kind of rubbish, which has no role to play in the criminal domain. But it's created a lot of jobs at the FBI, and it's created a lot of power bases where people can wield all kinds of government powers, intrusive powers, investigative powers against people based on Page, right? Carter Page. That was counterintelligence. That was not criminal. What they did to that man, what they did to the Trump campaign via that man, all that stuff. And so at a minimum, just shut that down. And the GOP can do that because they hold the purse strings, but they never make use of that power. It's like, no, we're not funding that anymore. It's done. So
and there's just
take what we give you, or we shut it all down.
Right. And just what you just mentioned is very interesting, because Danchenko, for the 3 years that he worked for the FBI, was apparently providing them important information about Russia and Ukraine. So the US government was relying on information about Russia from Danchenko. I mean, that's what the FBI said in this trial, didn't it?
A known liar.
Yeah.
And a known liar.
Exactly.
A known fabulist who just makes stuff up. And they opened 24 cases because of him. If I was one of the victims in that, targets or whatever, I would like to know everything, what was done there. And again, as you say, church commission, you need to, every single one of those 24 cases needs to be taken apart. Every single word that Danchenko said in respect of that needs to be analyzed. But as you say, with this Ukraine situation, I mean, it was just unbelievable. So this Kevin Helson, the guy we talked about, Danchenko's handler, he told the court last week that it was the biggest tragedy ever that when the war broke out, they didn't have Danchenko because they didn't ask him anymore about, you know, his geopolitical insights and how this is what we're going to do and this and that. It was completely unreal. No, I mean, Helson said Danchenko became the most important person in their anything to do with Russia. He was kind of their go-to guy in those 3 years. I mean, the amount of damage that he potentially caused is huge, you know, potentially. So someone needs to go and look at that. What did Danchenko do with respect to did they ask him about the first impeachment? Did they ask him about Hunter's laptop? I mean, if he's the go-to Russia guy, did they say, hey, Danchenko, this is his laptop. Do you think that could be Russian? Yeah, my friends, you know, they told me this was Russian. Or there's so much potential mischief.
Yes, that's at the bar. Yeah.
They told me in a bar. Yeah.
There's so much potential mischief that has not, that all of that will need to be unraveled or not. I mean, maybe it's just all going to be forgotten, but yeah, putting that, I mean, they say that, you know, putting the fox in charge of the hen house, we need a new metaphor because whatever they did here is much, much, much worse. For 3.5 years, they put a known fabulist about Russia, anti-Trump, very political, in charge of all things Russia. It's just, and you know, there's this other point.
Apparently, you know, I don't want to be cruel or anything, but apparently he has a substance issue too. Been reported.
Yeah, no, and this is documented. There's affidavits on this, plenty of them. No one's answered about that. No one said, you know, what effect did that have on anything? It's completely mind-boggling. And one thing we haven't mentioned, which is, you know, probably it's maybe a smaller thing in the bigger scheme of things, but it's the one that blew me away the most about this trial. I mean, just for this one point, the trial was worth it. We said that they appointed Danchenko as a source, so they paid him. They made him an FBI employee. They paid him $70,000 a year.
That's nice.
Just for telling them, you know, stories. And when they let him go, they had a big golden handshake as well. We don't know how much. So we know they did all that to hide him, so that they, you know, he just got taken off the grid. They didn't have to reveal his existence to Nunes or Congress or, you know, anyone, the court, Horowitz, you know, no one. But here's the thing, the FBI agent admitted last week that as soon as they hired him, right at the beginning of 2017, immediately after he admitted that all of the Steele dossier was just bar talk, they told him to erase all his devices. Because, you know, now that he's going to work for the FBI, they need to be super careful. So go and destroy all your devices. But those devices had all the evidence of him, you know, colluding with Steele and all this stuff that Durham now doesn't have, because all that evidence is gone. It's just unreal. It's just completely, you know.
But Mueller's people also, all the people who worked on Mueller, they all also erased all their devices.
Right, and they said, but you know, they can say, well, we're the prosecutors. This is for whatever reason, and yeah, of course it was. We know why they really did it, but they have a better excuse.
Are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to do that if you're a government employee, to erase your device?
No, you're not. But you're not going to get prosecuted for, you know, accidentally erasing it. You know, but here they specifically told Danchenko, who was the target of their investigation, or at least, you know, embroiled in the Steele dossier thing, who had admitted that basically Steele lied about everything, who had disavowed Steele, who was suspected of being a Russian intelligence official who had been investigated for that, where this investigation was never resolved, who had tried to recruit people with that kind of history. And the FBI tells this guy to you know, destroy all his devices. That actually happened. So to me, that was kind of maybe the highlight from last week.
Well, maybe we'll find
how bad things are.
Maybe we'll find out he's really a double agent. That would be the kind of encore, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be the encore, that he actually was a real Russian spy?
Yeah. Well, he certainly never had any qualms about going to Russia. Remember, he was very happy traveling there, never scared of anything. Didn't seem to be very concerned.
But didn't originally the FBI suspect that he was a Russian spy?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah,
they did,
that was,
yes.
yeah. So Well, yeah, but and then he kind of became this, they're reliable. So I mean, if they did think he was a Russian spy, it was very peculiar then for him to hire him as their confidential human source.
So he went from bar talk to Banya talk when he came to Moscow.
That's it.
Okay.
Exactly. Helson was asked, so to go, you have to go through these procedures when you have these informants or these sources or whatever. Confidential human source was his official title. So one of the procedures is he has to do a polygraph. He never did a polygraph. So Helson was asked, why didn't you do a polygraph? And Helson said, oh, I don't like the person who asked me to do the polygraph on Danchenko. So that was the sort of the quality of excuse he came up with. Didn't like the person. And then Durham said, but that person was a 19-year veteran of the military intelligence services and whatever. No, the person is terrible, doesn't understand anything, Of course, it has nothing to do with whether Danchenko should get a polygraph or not. And any number of other things that they needed to do to check on his records, like his communications. When he was in Russia, when he was doing things, did you monitor what he was doing? Did you check anything at all? No. Did you check anything that he told you? Did you verify it? No. Just nothing. It was,
You know what, you guys, to become a special agent of the FBI, you have to have at the very least a master's degree. The guy you're describing to me, it sounds like he never went to high school.
Yeah. But he was a kind of a creature of Fiona Hill. So, Fiona Hill kind of pops up at various points here because I think he worked for her, wasn't he? Her researcher.
He was, yeah.
And then of course this guy, the Clinton guy,
Dolan. She introduced him.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was the protege. He was her protege.
Correct.
So.
And she introduced him to Steele, so she's kind of
she's at the center of all those things,
right? As she was, of course, in impeachment 1. So it's like she.
Well, that's why, George. That's why periodically she gets a lead article in the Foreign Affairs and stuff like that. I think that it's all deflection because what she writes is of no import whatsoever. Okay, but it's to show that she's some kind of foreign policy guru and she's above it all. No, she was in the goo of it all, from what we can tell. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, Hans, this was a really interesting discussion. We covered a lot of ground, and you filled in a lot of.
And
I'm glad we don't pay you by the minute. Okay, 90 minutes.
I want the Danchenko pay.
Yeah, God, if you started charging us, we'd be, have to file for bankruptcy. But so valuable, all of your insights, and so because this is a very confusing case. I mean, so people, outsiders would have, real difficulties disentangling all these different strands. So thank you so much for, giving us your time. And I'm sure we will have you back again very, very soon because there's a lot of stuff going on. So remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.